Hey everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight. I am Peter, and joining me as always is Tim.
Yo, what's up?
Oh, now he does a good hello. We go through all of the Octoberthon, all 32 episodes that we did for that entire month. Every single time it was like, what? Oh yeah, hi, I'm here.
Or maybe that I just said the bar so low that you actually thought that was good.
I mean, that's just a fair point. I mean, I'm not saying it was amazing. I'm just saying it was notably improved upon earlier attempts or recent attempts. This is a horror movie podcast. This is Screams After Midnight. This week's movie is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, a movie that we could not do when it was released because we got different release dates for it. So we're coming here now. We had a slot open in the Octoberthon, right? Obviously, we just had it in October. We did episodes every single day. We had 2 on Halloween itself. It was a busy month. We had 1 slot open for a new release that, when I say new release, I mean something that had hit, VOD and home video in or around October. Something that we'd missed earlier, during the summer, in July in this case, right? And it was either Crawl or Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, with the other one being done as the first episode in November, which we're doing now.
Okay.
Had I known or remembered that Scary Stories was actually set on Halloween, I might have put that one in the Octoberthon and saved Crawl for this week. But to be fair, only the start of the movie set on Halloween, and then the rest of it set after Halloween, so arguably it's actually perfect. It's because it's mostly set in the first couple of days of November. So
yeah. And it still feels a little Halloween-y. Like, I think, looks like we got our, Halloween overlay up, and...
That's a good point, Tim. Yeah, I should have changed it. Why didn't you tell me that before we started, you prick?
Well, I didn't realize until just that second. I was like, wait a minute.
Hold on, where is it? There we go. Right, back to the regular color. Yeah, why were we still orange? That's Tim's fault.
Hey, why is it my job to check these things?
So as always, we will start off spoiler free. We'll give you warning before we go into spoilers. But this is going to be Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. This is a film based on a book that is full of short stories, and there was a lot of speculation. 3 books, sorry. But there was speculation before it came out, would this be an anthology? Would it be this? Would it be that? And it isn't an anthology. It's actually, they have built a narrative for which these different stories kind of feed into. And it is set in a small town, and we have these teenagers who discover this book in this kind of creepy old house where, legend has it this family kind of kept their daughter trapped. And the daughter maybe poisoned some local kids, but they find this book, and of course the book starts having more stories sort of appear in it, and these stories are happening for real. They're happening in the town to other characters, and the teenagers have to kind of try and deal with what's going on. So that is the basic gist of the movie. I suppose before I even ask if you liked the movie, Tim, had you read, or how familiar were you with the books?
Oh, very familiar. These are the ones that I definitely grew up with, which I'm assuming you haven't seen them before.
No, why are you assuming?
I don't know. You just see, you don't seem to know a lot of horror stuff, so I just.
Whoa, Mister! I think The Boy 2 might break $1 billion at the theater.
But no, I mean, I loved. Even before I started watching horror movies that much when I was a kid, I loved reading, and the stuff I loved reading was horror stuff. So I was totally a kid that grew up on Goosebumps, and these were a staple. And so I'm sure you probably heard with these books that the scary thing in them isn't the actual stories, because they just retell urban legends and myth and folklore, which they are entertaining, but they're very short, and they're not that scary. But what makes the books stand out, and why people still remember and have a fondness for them, are the drawings, because the drawings in particular were very they had a very specific style to them, and they were very kind of weird and creepy. And especially for a kid's book, you read a story that's just oh yeah, whatever, but then you look at this horrifying image, and that's what people probably would say would give nightmares and stuff. So and I actually, my wife got me them for Christmas maybe a year or 2 ago. So I did actually reread them earlier in the year before the movie came out. And they're still fun to read. They're they're very small, very short. You can read the whole thing in one sitting. And yeah, so I would definitely say I'm a fan of the books. And it is a very weird thing to adapt, though, because yeah, they are just all, random different short things. And yeah, it is kind of like, how do you necessarily bring that together? Also, do you do like a PG kid rated, movie? Because, even though, it's creepy and, grown up people now have a nostalgia for them, like, do you try to make it more adult, or do you still go, for kids, since they are like kids books? So going into the movie, I was actually kind of surprised how like adult it got, because it's not like a full, like R-rated horror movie or anything, but they definitely don't shy away from like, death, and there isn't really much gore, but like people do die, and there is like swearing and stuff. So I was a little bit surprised by that, but overall though, with the movie, I think it was okay. I definitely didn't hate it. I wouldn't say I loved it. I think I was into it for maybe the first half or like 2/3, when it was more just like, dealing with these kids and like their kind of adventures, and then having like the, kind of like the one-off different stories that are happening to them. I like that stuff. Where it kind of loses it for me was the like kind of, final act, when it starts to feel more like a generic horror movie, where it is just like, okay, now here is the, plot antagonist kind of thing, and the mystery that we have to solve and, find a way to cure or whatever is happening. Like that stuff to me just kind of, that's when it kind of loses it. But before then, I liked the, like the characters, and the, like when the stories are happening, the creatures, they kind of like are mimicking the art style of the book. So yeah, I did like it overall, but it is kind of a mixed bag for me, I would say.
I actually have very similar feelings to something you said there, where I thought it started off fairly promising. It had kind of a, I want to say slightly grown-up hocus pocus kind of feel to it.
Yeah, like well, sorry, but like almost like I don't know if I want to say like full like Spielbergian or something, but I felt like we're in for something like a, like one of those kind of kids movies that like we grew up watching that you don't see a lot of any, nowadays, where it's like, oh, this is cool that we're actually dealing with kids and stuff, and like, but it's not like a dumbed down like movie for 5-year-olds. It's like a, interesting kind of like fun kid adventure.
Yeah. No, like, because I felt like, okay, these Cast of Cat Kids feels very much like something I'd expect in an 80s movie, and they're relatively likable. I mean, a couple of them are kind of dickheads, but like they're kind of likable dickheads.
Yeah, totally.
And it kind of works for the most part. The bully's a little bit over the top, and again, feels like an 80s movie. Not that it's set in the 80s, it's set in 1968, but it feels like this is the way that someone in the 80s would write this movie set in 1968. And I was kind of into the opening chunk of the movie. I think it just kind of, as the movie goes, it legitimately sort of declines as the movie goes on. And like you said, the third act is easily the worst part, and easily just kind of buckles completely for me, to the point where it does all the things I dislike about like ghost movies and like whatever. And
I totally agree. It kind of feels like where they're just kind of like doing like little snippets of these different stories. I think that works, and then it feels like all of a sudden they have to introduce like a plot, and once you kind of get into that main plot, that's where it's like a big dip.
Yeah, it was just very generic kind of backstory about this this girl and her family, and she might have been crazy, and she told these stories and might have killed people, and it's all very, and it was fine at the start when we were kind of just setting this stuff up because they were in the house. It was creepy. This is how they find the book, but it became such a pivotal part of the movie that in the back half, like just what this backstory was, them researching and trying to find information on it, on this character, became such a big plot focus. And then, you know, like I would go as far as to say that I hated the last like 20 minutes. So
I don't know if I would say I hated it, but I definitely went from like being, you know, like, oh, I'm interested and I'm into this movie, to being like deflated and just like, all right, like obviously I'm still watching because I want to see what happens, but it's like now you're just kind of spinning the wheels, like, all right, let's just kind of get it over with. But yeah, I agree with what you said though. It is like it just feels like the same ending we get for like every ghost movie. Yeah, it's like there's always like a mystery, and then the characters like are desperately trying to research it and find it, and then there's usually like some type of twist or something that they figure out, and it just feels so whatever. And it's a shame because like before that, I wouldn't say it was like an amazing movie, but it was definitely something I was digging. Like I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then it's just kind of a big deflated. But I don't want to be too negative because it's not like that made me say, oh, I hate this movie. But yeah, it definitely could have been a lot better.
It's funny actually because the early on I was kind of thinking, because when it got to the first kind of horror story bit, like I wasn't in love with the horror story. It was kind of like, this is kind of almost giving me some vibes of the first It movie, where I kind of like the kids and kind of like the adventure-y vibe that it has, and the horror is kind of there because it's there for the plot, but it's not necessarily doing much for me in and of itself, and I was kind of okay with that. The problem is though is that like, as the movie goes on, it kind of becomes more and more like just like a typical horror movie where the kids are trying to solve whatever. So, because the horror stuff for me is mostly just kind of like, they're kind of these weird sort of pulpy light stories, which I don't necessarily mind in essence, but, and this is going to sound controversial, I don't actually like how a lot of the creatures and like figures look. I'm not really into the style, and I know that's what people love about the book is all the drawings, and I'm sure they lavishly try to recreate the what they look like in the drawings, but for me, like for the most part, I didn't necessarily like how they looked that much. And I know they're mostly practical, including the one towards the end that has definitely got some CG on it, because I thought it looked quite bad.
Me too. I would have guessed that was all CG because I didn't think it looked that great.
Well, apparently there was like some practical elements to it. Okay. There was an actor doing stuff, but I mean, just the face alone looks CG to me. So I'm not sure if we're just talking mocap here or if we're talking. But I thought it looked rough, so I don't know.
I mean, I think there were like two that for me I thought did it well, and then I think that and then the others I wasn't feeling as much. But I mean, I think that's kind of a problem too. Is like there's a lot of stories in this book, and it feels like they really don't cover that many. And like when they do the horror elements, they seem to be like very quick,
they're very short sections actually. They're not like very prolonged. It really feels like they're little, like, I don't even want to say 5 minutes. I think for the most part they're even less than that. And
like I don't know, it just seems like a very weird movie. Like I'm not sure exactly who this is for. Like I think obviously the big thing is a nostalgia grab for the people that grew up on these books, but I mean, honestly though, is like, all right, is this a movie for kids? Like, because if it is, like, I'd be kind of surprised because of some of the more adult elements in it. But then also, it's like, well, it doesn't really feel like a movie for adults either. Like, it seems like it's in this weird kind of in between where I don't know, maybe if they made up their mind and kind of went one way or the other, and it might have been a little better.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's a shame because
Oh no, actually, and I do just want to bring up for the record, I actually really like this director. So he did Troll Hunter and Autopsy of Jane Doe, which are two movies I really like a lot.
Yes, André Øvredal.
Okay. But yeah, no, I usually, I mean, obviously that's not a ton of movies, but I usually, like his stuff, so.
I like Troll Hunter. I liked Autopsy of Jane Doe, with the exception of maybe the last act kind of falling apart, which I think is even more true in this one. So maybe it's a worrying trend for his movies. Maybe I'm going to be concerned going forward that anything he's attached to, I'm going to be like, well, it might be good, but he's now got like a bit of a trend for me where he kind of shits the bed towards the end.
I don't necessarily mind the ending of the Autopsy of Jane Doe. It's definitely not the strongest part in my opinion, but I don't mind it. But I see what you're saying though.
Joe's funny because I actually like how the movie looks for the most part. I don't like how the horror stuff looks, but I actually like how the town looks. I like how the characters look. I like the feeling that it evokes. This again, sort of in the past, small town. And
I think it seems like kind of a weird choice having it set in the 60s, but I kind of like that stuff. Like, oddly enough, like I guess there's one specific part of it that can't really talk about because I guess it's kind of a spoiler, but it plays a specific role in one of the characters, and I actually thought like, oh, this is kind of like an interesting thing to be talking about in this movie. And I don't know. I think I heard some people saying like that it was a weird thing to set it in there, but I actually kind of dug that.
For me, I think it was because it was going for these pulpy horror stories, so I got the idea that the reason why it was set in the 60s is because it was a simpler like time. It was before cell phones. It was more kind of I mean, hell, arguably, I think the fact that it's set around the start of Vietnam is kind of important. It's this idea because that very much in terms of like culture was like the end of the Summer of Love and like the beginning of the cynicism and the jaded kind of attitudes that came from Vietnam and the shit that was going on in the world. So you tie that into the idea of these adolescents growing up, and this is kind of them losing their innocence and the darker stuff coming in, and the shock of reality and accepting kind of whatever, like that kind of thing, tying that into like with the election and Nixon becoming president and all that stuff, that works in theory. I don't think the movie does enough with it to really make it matter. I think the themes I was talking about there, about how the coming of age elements, perhaps, like I think that's been done way better in other movies, like and I mean horror movies. Like I'm talking about It Follows. I think It Follows is all about growing up and the loss of innocence. This is maybe trying to do it on a larger scale because it's just trying to tie it into like the war and all this other stuff that's going on. We have characters talking about the election in the background. We have characters talking about the draft and signing up and things like that. All of these things are there, and it's an interesting choice to try and tackle some of that stuff in here. Because I mean, was there any indication in the stories in the books that it was set at? Was it were the books written like in this time period? Like,
I would say like they're all dealing with again, it's like a lot of urban legends and folklore stuff. So there are some that like feel very like I would say almost like early, like what would you call that time century where not like medieval, I guess, but like stuff like with like when you're talking about like peasants and kind of stuff like
Dark Ages or
maybe, I don't know, like it's like there's some that feel like very I guess like almost timeless, like maybe like something like when you think of like a fairy tale or something, like maybe not thinking of a specific year, but not modern. Because there's stuff that deals like with witches and stuff, but then there's also like stuff that is a little more modern that might have something to do with like cars and like or a phone or something will be in it, so that it's like a modern day story, but it still didn't feel like like 80s or 90s stuff. Like it definitely does have a when you're dealing like with urban legends and you talk about stuff like people going out to Lover's Lane and that kind of stuff, has like a I guess probably like 50s 60s kind of vibe to it.
And it makes sense to kind of set it in the 50s or the 60s to get that kind of feeling, but it doesn't just set it in the 60s though. It specifically sets it in 68 and uses the politics of the year very heavily in its plot. Like it talks about Vietnam, it talks about the election, it talks about these things. Like it very much kind of says, no, we're set during this is a part of our world, and that's very specific. That's not just like a casual throwaway, like, oh, we'll do it, we'll set it during this year for the feeling, because then it'd just be, okay, they want it to look at the 60s, they want it to look at this time period, so it's set in that year, but they make it a part of the overall fabric. They really talk about what's going on, so it's a very specific choice, and I think that's is interesting. I kind of appreciate it. I kind of wish more horror movies were period pieces, because I think it works. I think it was refreshing not having characters like have their phones die, because that happens like all the time now in horror movies.
And as much as I love the 80s, it's like you can't set everything there.
Sure.
Like, I like having something that's a period piece that's, not that, because that's usually the go-to, which can be really fun a lot of the times, but yeah, it's nice to see something different.
No, I agree. That was nice. So yeah, the cast are not bad. I think the kids are all pretty likable. I think they do well with the roles. The bully's maybe a bit over the top, but like I think that character like Chuck, who's kind of a dickbag, but he was actually making me laugh a few times. There's a great moment in the middle where his sister's looking at a pimple in the mirror, and it reveals him standing behind her watching, and he's just watching like just kind of like half disgusted, just watching, and then even that scene ends with him yelling, "Hey, my banana!" Like like that scene was actually pretty funny. It kind of made me chuckle quite a bit. He was his comic timing, despite the fact that he's kind of this teenage douchebag, kind of worked to make it kind of feel a bit more real.
Yeah, I think sometimes these characters are it's a very fine line between like being charming and being annoying, and actually I did like him more than I probably would have thought I would, because he is definitely that sarcastic, jokey, kind of dumb character, but he pulled it off, and I did have a couple of genuine laughs with him as well.
Yeah, and then the main girl Stella is fairly likable. She's a horror fan, and she's got horror movie posters all over her wall, and like I think it's interesting, this movie has Night of the Living Dead in it, and but it's actually the year that it came out. It's like a new movie.
That's true.
This is a Lionsgate movie, so they could afford like the rights to get other movies, because we always joke about how Night of the Living Dead is used a lot because it's public domain, so it's like, hey, it's a famous movie, so people will recognize it and we don't have to pay for it, so we'll throw that in there. Although, interesting note, when we see it being projected at the theater, it's at the drive-in, it's on a widescreen screen, so I'm like, man, they're cropping the shit out of that, because Night of the Living Dead, if you don't know, is in 4:3, so that was just something that bugged me. And maybe actual theaters did this at the time, but it upset me. I was like, what are you doing? Stop it. How dare you? Always preserve the original aspect ratio.
Sure.
Yeah, or maybe a better phrase is the intended aspect ratio. What was it shot for? What was the cinematographer and the director, picking their images with? So no, it's a shame, because there's so many things that I think are really likable about it, especially early on, and I just think it becomes a movie I don't like. Like, the more it goes, the more it becomes something I just find kind of dull and uninteresting. There's a scene in the middle where they go to a character, like an old character who was around when this story happened, which actually surprised me, because I was kind of like, I assumed it was even older than that. I was like, I was surprised someone's still alive from, I thought it was like 100 years ago, but not quite that old. And they go to this old woman, and she just kind of speaks in riddles, and it was kind of like, how many times have we seen this scene where in a supernatural movie they go to a character who was around years ago when something happened, and they're kind of like senile and they can't talk properly, but some of the nonsense that they say kind of feels relevant, and like
that scene was like really unnecessary. I don't I do wonder if this is like one of those movies that just had like a bunch of extra stuff that they kind of like chopped and pieced together, because there's like stuff that feels like underused, like the guy that plays Stella's dad from Breaking Bad.
Dean Norris.
Like it seems like that's like a well enough known actor who felt like he had like no purpose in this movie. Like it seemed like such a wasted role. I don't know if maybe there was more of him like earlier on or something, or if they intended to do something else with him. But it seems like weird to get like an actor like that, who maybe not the hugest actor, but I feel like a lot of people know him from Breaking Bad, that it's such a small role.
Also, you'll find him in Lethal Weapon 2, and he looks almost the exact same in that movie, which was like 25 years before Breaking Bad. So I don't know, I always joke about this, but it really is true. Like, guys who go bald early end up looking the same age for like 40 years. Like they just kind of look the same for a long time. So like he is kind of underused, and I agree that feels like there was stuff cut out of that plot. Like, there's a whole thing about Stella's mother having left her as a kid, and like thematically it's there to set up her character and give you kind of who she is, and set up her abandonment and her being lonely and so on and so on. But it does feel like there's something missing there with that character. No, I agree. Honestly, this is the other thing. You mentioned how some stuff felt like, that unnecessary scene with the old lady. I feel like this movie is 1 hour 50. It's all, it's not that far away from 2 hours long, and I was surprised when I put it on that it was that long. I was like, oh shit, this is, and I was actually a little bit late to recording because of that fact, because I was expecting 90 minutes, and it's not terribly paced. There's definitely there's definitely worse examples and so on, but it definitely could easily trim. You could easily trim 10 minutes out of this.
Without a doubt.
Maybe even 20 if you really went for it and you choose. And this is the thing. I like a lot of the first act, so I'd keep most of that. I think that's all important stuff. I would just completely rewrite where it goes after that.
Yeah, for sure.
Is basically my thing, but so yeah, movie's a bit too long, so also an issue. I guess we'll go into spoilers. I think we've been dancing around things long enough. So full spoilers for Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I don't think we'll go through this one blow by blow per se. We're interested in the characters. We're interested in Ramon, who's kind of the outsider who's like driving through town. He receives a lot of racism in the movie. The sheriff's really kind of racist towards him. The big twist with him is we find out that he's actually a draft dodger. He's actually on the run feels a bit strong, but he's kind of moving around to avoid that. And the movie ends because he survives. Obviously, it ends with him actually getting on the bus to go, and it's the idea of him accepting his responsibilities as an adult. The idea that he's just turned 18 presumably, and he's off to do this. And that's kind of his arc for the movie. Again, it's one thing. It's something I wish they'd done more with. When they revealed like 2/3 through that's why he's kind of on the run. I was like, oh, okay. What are we going to do with that? And then it felt like they didn't really do much with it outside of him just accepting that he should do it by the end.
I agree with that. Like, I thought that was an interesting choice, and I did think it was weird. Like, early on, I was like, I hope eventually we learn something more about this guy, because it does seem weird. Like, he's kind of like a blank slate early on, but I think it was like a very interesting choice that they end up making. I don't know. I feel like I don't know. He didn't have to. I kind of like wish he didn't end up like going to war at the end. I don't know, it seems like. You can accept your responsibility, but you still don't have to like go to war if you don't want to.
I think your personal beliefs really sort of come into this one, because I'm sitting there thinking like, no, screw them, not go to Vietnam. Should not be forced to go to war. So, come on. So. Like, you got that, and the big. I liked a lot of stuff in the early when they're running from the bullies, because they've threw shit at them and eggs and whatever else, and the bullies are chasing them. They run to the drive-in theater and they end up in the car with Ramon. That's how they meet him, and they kind of bond a little bit. There's a bit of chemistry between Stella and Ramon.
And again, like you said, like all this stuff is like really fun. Like it does feel like one of those, I don't know, kind of like early like kids adventure movies or something.
Yeah, I feel it almost feels like it could be a horror version of the Goonies. Like it could be going down that path. They're a little bit older than those characters because they're more like 16 to 18, but like like it definitely has that kind of feel to it to me. And they go out of the house and they're creeping around. They find the book. And then I think the real thing we're going to talk about here is the various stories and how they happen. The first one is the bully, and it's the Scarecrow story. Harold, what I say?
Yep.
Yeah. And it's basically really simple that the Scarecrow comes to life and chases him a little bit and eventually stabs him with a pitchfork, and then the bully himself kind of starts growing hay and becomes a Scarecrow. He becomes the Scarecrow. And the characters kind of like come and see him. Stella gets worried when he disappears, and they come and see him, and it's like, hey, that Scarecrow's wearing the Letterman jacket. Is that him? Like, did he become this?
And they start noticing like the stories in the book. It's like the book starts writing itself when the things start happening.
What did you think? What did you think of this first one, though? This Harold section.
I like this one. I think, like you said, the bully is over the top, but I actually do like when they do that in movies. Like I always think a bully character is interesting, and like I like when he is like so very over the top to the point where you're like, Jesus, like why is no one doing anything about this person? I liked the way the like Scarecrow looked, and I think we might differ on that because the look and stuff did work for me, and I liked when it was kind of moving around and stuff. And I do remember the Scarecrow from the books, but I don't remember what actually happens in the story. So yeah, what's kind of funny about I'll go into it in like the next one. But no, this one worked for me. I thought it was like pretty cool.
That was okay. I thought they overdid the sound effects because when he started moving, it was like these really loud, like over the top sound effects and stuff. I think the sort of ending of it was kind of weird to me because they stabbed him with the pitchfork, and I thought, okay, he's going to murder him like a slasher villain, cool. And then the kid like starts like coughing up hay, and I'm like, wait a minute, what are we doing here? And he becomes a Scarecrow himself, and I'm like, okay, all right, so we're doing sort of quirky little ends like that, fine.
And like what I think is kind of weird with it, though, and again, I feel like this is part of the movie not knowing if it's for kids or adults or whatever, but like he gets stabbed with a pitchfork, but there's like no blood.
Yeah. Like, yeah. Is it PG-13? Because I feel like that felt PG-13 to me.
It has to be PG-13.
Yeah.
Yeah. But like I don't know if it's like maybe like more on the 13 side, because like we watch like a lot of PG-13 horror movies, but you can still have blood and stuff in it, like maybe it's like PG-13 because there's more grown-up stuff, but it's still not like going like full gore or anything.
Yeah, I think the racism and stuff is probably the more harsh elements that for younger
I think
audience.
That stuff, yeah, definitely. I would say like that's like some more of the adult themes, like honestly, like that kind of surprised me more, like dealing with stuff like that versus crazy monsters coming to life and attacking people.
Yeah, the next one was I actually misread this because the handwritten like font in the movie. I thought it said Joe, not Toe, because it was like, was it one big Joe, one lost Joe? So I thought it said Joe, and then it wasn't until like the story got going I was like, oh, it said Toe. That makes more sense. And this is the sort of more I won't say pretentious, but he's
he's kind of like, I guess he would probably be like, if you're looking at like archetypes, I guess he'd be kind of like the nerdy character, but not like a like comic booky kind of guy, but like a more little fastidious kind of guy.
Yeah, like a little bit of a smart ass, kind of that.
Like early on in the movie, he's dressed up like a, everyone just thinks he's a clown or whatever, but he keeps correcting him, saying like, no, I'm like this, Della Arte, like French, mime or like whatever.
Yeah, was it a petit or something?
Yeah, like something like that.
I can't remember. I wasn't going to bring it up because I couldn't remember what he said he actually was, but you went there anyway, Tim. So,
but I mean, yeah, well, it's basically like a funny gag though, where just like everyone's like, "No, you're a clown," and he's like, "No, I'm like this very artsy, pretentious thing."
Yes. So basically,
I did like the costumes in the beginning too, like the kid, then the other like smart ass kid, he wanted to be Spider-Man, but his mom just got him like a spider costume.
Yeah, pardon me. That's actually kind of funny because Spider-Man's not that old in 1968.
Yeah.
Spider-Man's like 5 years old at this point or something like that. Like
True, yeah.
He's a new concept. So this is the zombie woman looking for a lost toe, which is inside the stew that's in the fridge. Which, by the way, so this kid, I think Augie was his name. Yeah. He's on the phone to his mum and he's like, "Hey, so you left with the new husband for the weekend without like getting food and stuff, and that's kind of, I'm going to eat this stew that's in here." And you don't hear what she says. He's like, "Well, someone had to make it. It's here. I'm going to eat it." And I'm like, if you tell if you live with your parents, right, and you say, "Hey, Mom, I'm going to eat this food that you made," and because it's not like a packaged thing, it's like a pot of something that's been cooked. "I'm going to eat this cooked food that's in here," and they say, "Wait, I didn't make that." I'm not touching it after that sentence because I don't know where it came from. I'm not trusting what's in there.
Yeah.
He's just spooning it like nobody's business. And even when because this is like the second one, so this time Stella's actually looking at the book, so they're actually trying to call him and try to tell him, "Hey, you're in this next story, like don't eat anything." And he's like just taking mouthfuls as they're saying this. He's not paying attention to them, and he eats the big toe, which honestly, disgusting. I hate people eating things like this. And chewing it and then realizing and then spitting it back out. The whole thing is disgusting.
It's gross. I was like, for God's sake, like just look at it before you like eat anything.
Yes.
Like, I know. So like, what's funny is like I do remember this story from the books, and what's interesting about the way the books are written is like this was basically a story, and it's like very weird. Again, it's kind of like a kind of like a myth, folklore kind of thing, where like a woman is like walking along and she sees a toe sticking out of the ground and like it's a vegetable or something. She just kind of just plucks it up and is like, "Ooh, this will be good in a stew." And then she goes home and cooks it in a stew, and then during the night she starts hearing like a ghostly voice say like, "Who took my toe?" But what's interesting with the way the books are written is a lot of times they don't really have endings, and like what they'll do is like a lot of the times the author will be telling the story, and then instead of an ending, like they'll put something like, "Now turn to your friend and say boo," or something. Like it'll basically just be like oh, then the woman got closer and closer and closer, and then like in parentheses it'll say like, "Now is when you," because there's supposed to be stories that you kind of like read aloud to your friends and stuff, and like try to scare them. So then they'll, instead of endings, they'll just have like directions for like to scare someone or whatever. So I think it's kind of like another problem with doing an adaptation like this, where you have stories that might have cool, interesting concepts, and then like cool illustrations with them, but then ultimately like the endings just end up being kind of underwhelming. Like it's just like, he gets dragged under a bed, or
it's a really generic like thing. It's just like being dragged into the darkness under the bed as he's like clawing at the floor. It's like a nothing moment, so that was that one. And the next one is the red spot, which is you think is going to be Chuck because he has like ketchup on his shirt, but it's actually his sister who was introduced, and Augie kind of had a crush on her. She got more likable because she tried to stick up for them when the bully was being mean to them and trapping them in the house. And she basically has this big pimple that keeps getting bigger and bigger, and when she goes to burst it, basically it reveals like a bunch of bugs and spiders or whatever it is. And but they actually show up in time to try and save her, and they pour like water over from a mop, or from a bucket rather, and like they save her. She's not dead, but she goes to a mental institute. So she's pretty messed up.
What I think is funny about this is like I think like a little later on they mention, I think they talk to the sheriff or whatever, and they're like, oh, like, and they talk about her, and he says like, yeah, but like, you saved her, but she's going to be in a mental institution for the rest of her life. And it's like, the rest of her life? Like, it's been a day. Like, I think, give her a little credit. Like, I'm sure she's, not going to be, it's a traumatic experience, but I feel like it wouldn't be the kind of thing that you would just like, all right, your life is over now.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, it feels a bit quick to be making that prognosis, especially from this guy.
Yeah.
But this is also the guy who's been racist all movie. So I mean, it's not like we're
That's true.
really taking anything he's saying at face value here. But he,
we'll keep going with this particular story, though. I do like this one. Like, it is again, it feels like a very urban legendy kind of thing, and I liked a lot of the stuff like leading up to it. Like, I actually did feel bad for the character because like everyone's just constantly telling her like, ew, that's gross. Like, you gotta do something about that. And then, like her, like kind of like poking at it in the mirror and stuff, and then like seeing like a little leg come out. Like, I thought that was some good body horror stuff. I do think once it burst open, the spiders were pretty CGI-y, like, I don't think it looked great.
Yeah, no, it didn't look good. The next one is in the hospital because after they go to visit the old lady, they basically say, oh, there'll be hospital records of her being at this place, and they sneak in and they try to go to the red room, which is like this records room, and Ramon and Stella are looking through this stuff, and they find out that it wasn't Sarah, the ghost that wrote all these stories that the legends about that did all this. She didn't poison kids. It was her family. Her family were evil, and her family like tortured her, and her brother was like the doctor who worked at this hospital and like did electroshock therapy on her and like all sorts of things. So it sounds like this monstrous family were just like absolutely like awful to her, and this is kind of like where I think her mother leaving kind of stuff comes into it, because the big thing with the ghost is at the end is that she says to her that yes, your family were horrible to you and all of that is on them, they did awful things and you can't be blamed for that, but you've become a monster just like them and that is on you. And I think that's kind of like feeding into her because she's very worried that she can't leave her dad, and she's worried that that'll like correlate with what her mother did, and it kind of ties into her relating to her in a lot of ways. She's also a bit of a loner. She's also writing creepy stories. Like, it does all these things to try and kind of like link them in. I think it's a little bit thin. I don't think it really works for me, but this was kind of the big first hint of it, is this stuff here where we find out the backstory. Again, far too detailed, too much stuff. I hate that we actually see her like meet the ghosts at the end and like is sort of living out all that stuff. That's just all very generic to me. But the actual horror story here is Chuck's running around on his own in the hospital, and I didn't quite catch the name of this one.
It's the pale lady. The
pale lady, yes. It's this sort of fat, deformed lady who's sort of stalking him down the hallway. Everything turns red lighting, and is stalking him. And every time he tries to run in the other direction, she seems to be coming from the new direction. Whatever way he's running to, she seems to end up coming from that direction. And she's getting closer and closer, and it ends with her absorbing him. She kind of hugs him and just kind of absorbs him into her stomach. And I kind of, this is probably my favorite one just because it has such a trippy visual. Like, the actual visual of him getting absorbed into her is actually kind of unique, and felt weird and kind of like, oh, surreal, and what's going on?
Yeah, I think this one was done really well. I like I actually think it had like a lot of really good lead up into it. Like because he's mentioning like earlier before about how he's having these bad dreams and like within this red room, and that's why when they go into the records room, he's like, oh no, like I'm not going there, like I don't want to end up like my dream. But then he ends up getting chased around, and I think the actor did like a really good job like conveying like the kind of panic that he's starting to feel. And then once he's kind of like off on his own little section, and then the alarms start blaring and everything starts turning red, it's like a nice little like, oh shit, like this is going down. And then just the ominous like figure constantly coming towards you no matter like which way you turn was just really cool. Again, it does seem like a weird, like, out of nowhere ending. Like, it's just like, all right, that's it. Like, I mean, it does like look cool, him getting absorbed into her, but again, it just kind of feels like there's no like connectedness to these stories or anything. Like, they're entertaining to watch, but it's just like, all right, so what's the ultimate end game of these stories? What are they trying to do? Are these people dying? Are they actually dead? Or are they being like
more on that later, Tim, because the ending kind of murkies this up a little bit. But he gets absorbed, and that's one word for me, I think, because it was just a simple kind of like, no, this stalking monster's coming and coming, no matter what he does, it keeps getting closer, and then it gets to him, and that's it, he's done. And it was a trippy visual, but the other kids get arrested for being in the hospital. And this is where we have the stuff with the sheriff, and I think probably my least favorite like creature or character, horror character, is in this bit where this body comes in parts and then kind of forms in together, and it's kind of this, again, apparently a lot of this was practical, but a lot of it looks very CG to me.
It doesn't look good.
I did not like how this looked at all, but they go on the run, and they steal the cop car after the sheriff gets killed by the monster, and they're riding away from it, and Ramon's like, hey, you have to go tell Stella, you have to go tell Sarah the ghost the truth and end this. And this is some of the stuff that I hate the most about these types of movies, and why I'm so upset this became such a generic sort of like supernatural movie by the end. Any ending of a story like this, where the culmination, the way it's solved, the answer to the problem, is the main character basically bargaining with the ghost and try to convince them to like, like, hey, it's not your fault, you can be better than this, like, you've become this monster now. Anything that involves them just convincing them and appealing to their humanity, and then especially when the ghost actually like goes along with it and does actually say, hey, okay, end the story, use your blood, and she gives Stella the pen, and she like writes the end of the story to wrap everything up. And which, by the way, Ramon's doing a really good job like fending off this monster for like a long time while this is all going on, because Stella ends up like sort of becoming Sarah for like a flashback, and she's like going through the house, and the family's like dragging her by the hair and doing all these things, and like I hate this scene. Anything like this where you can just talk to the ghost and kind of convince it like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do this. I'm like, well, I don't know, this just ruins any creepiness that might have been there. Like, I don't know.
And it's also like a weird kind of message. Like you mentioned earlier, like when she said, something along the lines of like, yeah, like what your family did to you was horrible, but now you're becoming a monster and stuff. And it's like, what's the message here that like, people who suffer trauma like become like monsters themselves? Like it's kind of strange. And then I'll like, to be completely honest, like I don't know if I really like understood like what was happening at this point. Not necessarily that it's like confusing, but it's just like it feels like they throw like so much stuff at you like all of a sudden that you're just like wait, what? Like yeah, like he the big thing is like he's sounding like you have to tell her the truth. I'm like, what truth? Like what? Like why does that matter? Like why is that a thing?
The truth being that, hey, we know you didn't poison the kids, you're innocent, like you didn't do that, like kind of thing.
Why?
I don't know.
What was it?
I don't know. For some reason they think that'll solve the problem. That'll fix everything.
I mean, they're right. It does, but like, I don't know.
Yeah. And again, I think what it's saying is that you don't have to be like, if your parents were awful, you don't have to be them. And I think Stella's fear that she'll become her mother and abandon her father is kind of like leading into this. No, you don't have to like be them. You can be better. You don't have to be a monster, kind of thing. I think that's what it's going for. But I hated this scene with the passion. The epilogue's really weird because she starts the movie off with narrating, right, and it comes back at the end and she's narrating what's going on here, and it's like her and her dad are moving, and it does this weird reveal where Chuck's sister's with them, not with her parents. Chuck's sister has moved with them and they're leaving town, and the narration is really weird here because she says something like, I know Chuck and Augie are still actually out there and the secret to getting them back is in this book. And I'm like, is this some sort of weird sequel bait? What is this? Like, why does she think she can like take them back out the book? And Like,
Yeah.
I don't know, because as she was saying this, like, we're going to find you, and the camera like pans, and we see Chuck's sister in the back seat. You know, she's got like a big scar on her cheek from the whole spider thing, but she's fine and she's smiling. I thought, this is a really weird ending. Like, they're teaming up to like try and find the guys who disappeared somehow. Like,
Yeah, it's super weird, and
especially since they've already beat the ghost. The ghost has already backed off and said, "You know what? You're right. I'm going to stop this."
yeah, yeah, and like I don't know what, like if that's what they're saying, like what happens to them then? Like maybe they've been absorbed into the book, but I mean, I guess if that's your point, like I feel like maybe it should have been like clearer, because that's what I was trying to think of. Like, okay. Because it feels like the bully dies in his story, but then like becomes a scarecrow or whatever, but that seems like that's death, you know. But then like the other ones, it's like, okay, you're getting dragged under a bed, you're getting absorbed into this monster. Are you like becoming part of the book then? Is that what they're trying to say?
Maybe.
But then, I mean, if that's the case though, then like if they are doing a sequel, it's like, I don't know, it's annoying, or at least it seems like annoying if, you know, it's going to focus on that, because really, like, if they did a sequel, all I would want is just more like adaptations of the story. I don't want to see some.
And actually,
you know,
if there is a sequel, where do the stories come from? Because there has to be stories.
Yeah,
that's the whole that's the whole premise of the movie. Like, so who's writing the stories if the ghost has been like, you know what, you're right, I'm retiring.
Yeah.
Like, then who's doing it?
Yeah, such a weird like way to go about it. I don't know.
Yeah, the ending really made me sort of like just a little confused as to what the choices were. I'm like,
yeah.
What? What's this? Okay, that's weird. And you know, we just end with them in the car with their dad, like driving out of town. They're leaving and going somewhere. For her to be a writer, I guess, like, you know, because that's what she wants to do. But I don't know.
It seems like maybe they're trying to like do too much stuff where, like, yeah, if you just focus on like, you know, these stories coming to life, like that's good enough on its own. Like, you don't need all of this backstory. Like yeah, I'm sure you need a reason for it, whatever, but just like have like, you know, some quick thing about like, yeah, this person wrote the book and now it's coming to life, but like, don't make it like a central mystery to your like storyline and stuff, because that's just all the stuff that brings it down.
Yeah, that's everything that kind of derailed it. And then, like I say, talking to the ghost, the way it ends, all that stuff, and then like, there's those weird choices at the end. There's just, I don't know. But by the time it gets to the third act, it's just completely lost me, basically, which is a shame, because I was kind of into it at the start of the movie. I was into the first, 20-30 minutes. I was like into the ride, and I was like, okay, what's it doing? It's setting up some characters that are kind of likable, and I'm liking the tone of the overall thing, and that kind of almost Spielbergian 80s kind of kids dark adventure kind of thing. And I think it kind of just goes away from it and becomes more generic, and it's a shame. But Tim, what are you going to rate Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark?
It is tough, because I will still say that I did like it. Like, it never, like the parts that I wasn't into, like, yeah, it is a shame, but I think the other parts worked well enough for me that I wouldn't say that it ever made me hate the movie. But yeah, it feels like there was a lot of missed opportunities or directions that they went down that, yeah, I kind of wish they hadn't. But overall, though, I still did have a good time watching it, even if it was like, yeah, like a little too long. You know, I was still invested enough that I was like, well, I want to see this through to the end. I never feel like I completely checked out. So I feel like 6 is just a tad too high, so I'll go a little bit down. I'll give it a 5.5. But yeah, I mean, it's a shame, because there definitely was like good stuff in there, but
yeah,
unfortunately, just didn't end up pulling it out.
Yeah, I'm kind of same, but 5.5 is kind of where I'm landing on ultimately. It's a shame, because if it had kept up what it was doing at the start, like, it could have been maybe at least a 7, if not higher.
Yeah,
but I have to. If I'm going to have to like settle on one, I'll say 5.5. There's enough good stuff in the first half that I can't quite say it's bang in the middle, but Yeah, 5.5. So unfortunately, it didn't live up too much by the end, but did have some promising elements in there. So that is Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. This has been Screams After Midnight. You can let us know what you think of the movie in the comments below. You can like and subscribe, all the usual things. Get us on the Twitters at mailed_fudge for channel updates. You can get us specifically on Twitter at Screams Midnight for horror movie shenanigans. Me and Tim making fun of each other. Other random tidbits. At Screams Midnight is the Twitter you want to follow. You can support what we do here. You can support the show and everything else we do on MailFuzz TV by going to patreon.com/MailFuzzTV and supporting us there for as little as $1 per month. You get a bonus exclusive episode of Screams every month. We did 4 for the Octoberthon, but the regular is 1 per month. So there's a little back catalogue built up now. You get access to the back catalogue and of course whatever new one we're doing for this month. And we do have one picked out, and that should be fun. So go check that out. But in that back catalogue you have the entire Wishmaster franchise, you have Blood Diner, you have The Invisible Maniacs, some delightful B movies and ridiculous silly things that you should have fun hearing us talk about. So you do that. $5 tier of course has voting rights every month and so on and so on. So go and have a look and see if you're interested in any of that. You can support us as well by rating us on your podcast app. Apple Podcasts being the most common one. Give us 5 stars, helps more people find us. But otherwise that is us. So thank you very much for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching scary movies, guys, and we will see you next time.